Hello, welcome to Pro Quote Film and to our live Q-Talk event, Women's Best for Europe. My name is Jenni Zylka, and for the next 2 hours we are going to talk about women in the film and TV industry, about obstacles and facts and expectations, and about best practice in front of and behind the camera, with wonderful guests and experts from all over Europe who will be zoomed in directly to our studio from their countries to join me here in my studio. So please stay tuned and listen and learn. And we start this very important experience with some data and facts about the situation and the current state for women in front of the camera. And I'm very pleased to welcome here the chairwoman of Pro Quote Film, Barbara Rohm, and agent and actress, and also member of Pro Quote Film and of the German TV Academy, Chun Mei Tan. Hello, ladies.
Hello,
up to you.
Yes, Germany holds the presidency of the European. Sorry, with micro it's better to understand. So welcome again. Germany holds the presidency of the Council of the European Union, and it's time for us to look to Europe and to our network. Welcome on the behalf of the members of Pro Quote Film. During the last years, we were able to expand our international connections, and we would like to present today the expertise and best practice in front of and behind the camera from different countries.
Well, the very difficult situation for filmmakers in Europe, it's not only in Europe but worldwide. And unlike in Germany, in many other countries, the problems are not only talked about, but they are acted up. So let's have a look at the second sheet, which is the report which calls Rewrite Her Name by the Children's Rights Organization Plan International and the Geena Davis Institute, and which investigated the most successful films of 2018 in 19 different countries all over the world, applying gender and diversity criteria. So let's have a look what they found out. As we see, 67% of all leading roles are male. The male leading roles talk twice as much as the females. There are no female directors. Only 1 of 4 films there is a female producer involved, and there is only 1 of 10 writers who are female.
Yes, and so we look at the next sheet, and young women need role models. But even here, the screens do not have much to offer. A good example of how important they are is the Geena Davis Institute study about the effect of the series X-Files with female protagonist Dana Scully, played by Gillian Anderson. And they found out that 63% of women who work in STEAM, that means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, say that Dana Scully served as a role model. And they also showed that among women who are familiar with Scully's character, 63% say that Scully increased their confidence that they could excel in a male-dominated profession. And also the study by Plan International shows how we can promote the necessity of cultural change. And they say that call to action means to be it, they must see it. That means girl needs role models, and stop sexualization and the objectification of women and girls on screen. Fund female filmmakers that they can tell their stories and show us their perspectives. And Jenny, we are curious to see what measures and actions our international guests want or will show us today.
Thank you very much. We're going to see you in a bit very sad and interesting facts that you brought up.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce my first guest to you. She's a TV presenter, she's a broadcaster, an activist, a producer, an empowerment expert. She works for BBC and ITV. She runs the website Wonder Women and Wonder Women TV. She's a Jack or Jane of all trades. Please welcome from the UK, Ria Hebden. Hello, Ria. Hello, Ria. Do you hear me? Hello. Hi. Nice to see you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Hi. Okay, so I just said that you have this wonderful thing called Wonder Women TV and Wonder Women. Maybe you can tell us about that. What kind of women are the Wonder Women?
Wonder Women is an inspirational network of a diverse range of women who are very diverse in age, in ethnic background, and in experience, but they predominantly work in television in the sector and across the creative industries, either in freelance production roles or in corporate roles within the major broadcasters or production companies.
Mm-hmm. And what advice can you give us for building a supporting network? How did you do it?
Well, I created Wonder Women because I personally felt that there was a real lack of networks and women championing each other. I mean, I created it back in 2016 at a time where we didn't have mentoring programs and we didn't have panels that had really inspirational businesswomen sharing their stories and talking about how they got to where they are in their careers. So that's what spurred me to set it up. And it's been wonderful to see it evolve and grow. So I would encourage everyone to look for these female networks that are out there. We've got the Women in Film and Television Network, which is global, obviously Wonder Women, but more and more are starting to pop up now, which is brilliant. It really feels like there's a moment for women this year.
Mm-hmm. You have a lot of experience in front of the camera. What are, in your opinion, the most common obstacles that women, if women want to get into presenting or in front of the camera in general?
Well, there are a couple of things. I think one of the main challenges with wanting to get into television and be a presenter is obviously it's very competitive. But there are a few institutional things, I think, within the industry that can hold a lot of talented people back. And it can take some real resilience for those people to stick at it to actually get through. And I worry that a lot of people might actually just give up altogether because it can be so hard. One of those things I would say is there can be a lot of wasted meetings with people. You know, if you're very lucky and you manage to get time with producers or commissioners, sometimes it can feel like there's no clear agenda or there's no clear next step, and you have your meeting but then you're lost into the ether. Also, institutionally, I would say that there seems to be this thinking that you need to have an agent. And I worry that there are lots of people out there who are really talented that miss out on opportunities because they just don't have that representation, which I think is a real shame, because I actually managed to get myself on screen without having an agent. And so I just think, that's a damaging message that we're putting out to aspiring presenters, that maybe make them feel that it's not possible for them, and we could really avoid doing that.
Thank you. We all know that there are lots of stereotypes when it comes to women in television and film. What are the most annoying stereotypes that we have to overcome in the film and media business, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think we do stereotype women who are mothers. And I think we really need to be careful about that, because I think people pass judgment onto you and to others, assuming what you're capable of, because they assume that you might not be able to manage your family and your caring responsibilities without actually ever working with you before, And I think that's a really worrying thing that we need to stop altogether, because I've been lucky enough to work alongside some incredible female women throughout my career who happen to be mothers, but you'd never know had they not told you, because they're so driven and so good at what they do. And so I worry sometimes that the decision makers who sometimes choose if you are quite literally hired or not, if they discover that you're a parent, sometimes that unconscious bias can hold you back and they might not pick you for the role, which I think can be hugely damaging.
And as a woman of color, what do you think about opportunities today, especially in the UK or maybe also in Europe or globally?
I think we're definitely having a real moment for diversity. There's a huge drive happening globally in improving diversity. I think the McKinsey & Co report has proven time and time again it makes good business sense for all businesses to be diverse. It should just be in their DNA. But that shouldn't even be the reason. It should be just because it's the right thing to do. As a company, you're going to reap people with more experience, better stories, better expertise if you diversify your workforce. So it's an exciting time, but I'm also conscious of being realistic unrealistic, because people who are older than me and have been in the industry even longer tell me time and time again that there are always these waves of moments where there's these initiatives to drive and improve diversity, but then it peters down. And so, you know, it makes me think, what can we do now to ensure that this isn't just a fleeting moment, that it actually really does impact and instigate long-lasting change?
So you think it's changing, yes, but maybe not fast enough, or what would you say? Is it changing?
I think things are definitely changing. In the UK, you can see that, you know, there's obvious improvements in terms of on-screen diversity. The broadcasters are doing it really well, especially ITV and the BBC. But I still think there's a lot of work to do behind the screen. You know, the crew are not as diverse as they could be. On the productions that I've worked on, I've been really pleased to see more women in, you know, camera roles, actually doing sound and, you know, getting involved, which is brilliant. But again, there's still so much more that could be improved, you know?
Would you say that the Black Lives Matter movement is also of big importance in the UK and in Europe, or what kind of importance does it have?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a real moment for everyone in the world to relook at the structures in society, the institutions, and really question if they are working effectively and if they are fair. I think it's a real moment for everybody to really overhaul some of the structures that have been holding a lot of people back for many, many years. And I just think, you know, as a business leader, this is actually an exciting opportunity to tap into new talent that maybe you've not worked with before, and give new opportunities and see, you know, the benefits that you'll bring on your business by doing that.
Yeah, let's stay maybe with this positive thinking. Which best practices in terms of empowerment of women, especially maybe women of color, do you know in UK or in Europe?
Sorry, I missed that.
Which best practices do you know in terms of empowerment of women? Are there any positive examples?
Yeah, absolutely. When you put women in positions of power, like commissioning, you can see the benefits for the broadcaster, but also for the audience, because we see new stories being told. For example, Fatima Salaria, an absolutely brilliant commissioner. She worked at the BBC. She then moved over to Channel 4 as the head of specialist factual. She's now gone over to Fremantle, and she's doing amazing things. She's just been announced as, I think, the executive chair of the Edinburgh TV Festival, which is just amazing. I mean, it just shows you when people are empowered, what they're capable of achieving, you know, furthermore from there. And I'm really excited to see how she'll mix things up for the festival next year, with her, you know, having a key role in that.
Maybe you can tell us something about your experiences when you presented the Diversified TV Excellence Award in Cannes 2 years ago, and also about the subject awards as such. Can awards like this change society, or can they at least maybe raise a kind of awareness?
It was a real pleasure to host the Diversified TV Awards in Cannes back in 2018. This brought together some of the executive producers from all over the world to show some of their films and TV programs and really celebrate diversity. The problem for me, though, as the host of that event, was what I felt was there was a brilliant energy in the room of creative minds coming together and celebrating each other's work. But I think what would have been more productive, and maybe that's a suggestion for the festival going forward, is to have different commissioners from the broadcasters attend that event, because in that room, everybody was already invested in improving diversity. So I think to really instigate real change, you have to bring in new people where it's just not part of their thinking, so that then they're thinking differently going back into their roles. It's interesting what you say about awards and if they're effective and how you change them. Having been on the judging panel for the Royal Television Society, for the TV Awards, and also for the Women in Film and Television Network Awards, I think it's very important that the people around the table in those spaces are diverse, because we know that when people win awards, they get more commissions, they get more industry kudos. So it's important that to really open it out, to allow new talent to come in, and for new stories to be told, and for new people to be recognised, that the people around the judging table are diverse too. BAFTA's doing a very good job. They've just opened up their membership, but more broadly, so we're seeing more diverse members there. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the nominations for future awards going forward.
Yes, and you said that already. We have to change a lot of different things, but maybe tell us what to change first. The boards, or the funding, or the networks, or the people's minds, what would you say?
Well, I think, the power sits with senior management at commissioner level, that senior decision-making level. You need to address that for everything else to trickle down. There's lots of brilliant work being done on the entry-level units with the RTS, with BAFTA, with all of the broadcasters. So, it's not the entry level, it's more the mid-senior level. That's where we're seeing a stagnation, and that's where there's so much work still to be done. I think ring-fencing money is really effective. It shouldn't be necessary, but I think let's give it a go. The same with quotas. I think if it makes things change more quickly, then let's give it a go.
Or maybe as a last question, is there any kind of advice you could give for women who want to, do the same thing or almost the same thing that you do? Some nice and easy, hint?
Oh my goodness. I would say the best thing you can do is identify somebody in the industry who's quite senior and successful, who you admire, who could potentially be a sponsor for you. Because having sponsors and mentors in this industry are worth their weight in gold. You need people in those rooms fighting your corner and throwing your name in the hat, and tap into the networks that are out there, because there are some brilliant networks, as I've mentioned, the RTS, BAFTA, Wonder Women, of like-minded people, very creative, who all want to help elevate each other. And this is an industry, it's an exciting place to be. It can sometimes feel like you're on your own, and by tapping into those networks, you can feel very much part of a family.
Thank you, Ria, so much for these really interesting insights and for your inspirations and for your energy. Thank you very much, and greetings to the UK.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, our next guest is a highly acclaimed director who worked on some really amazing projects. She directed Netflix shows, worked with HBO Europe and with TNT, amongst other things, and she received lots of prizes for her work as a director. She's also a member of the German and the Romanian and the European Film Academy. But first, we are going to watch a trailer for one of the series she worked with, and you may have seen it. It's very famous and it's really wonderful. Hackerville.
Die Server laufen heiß. Einer raucht schon.
Ich mach mal die Monitore an.
Für Showtime!
Ich habe mit dem Polizeipräsidenten und Filmischer gesprochen.
Und er sagte mir, Sie seien gerade dabei, ein rumänisches Hackernetzwerk auszuheben, zu sprengen.
2 bănci germane au fost atacate în ultimele 24 de ore.
Eu nu mai zic nimic până nu vine avocatul.
La mulți ani, mă.
Ești tare.
Dar de ce-ți pasă așa de mult de copilul ăsta?
Tocmai că e un copil și are un talent special.
Also pass auf dich auf, wenn du da unten bist, ja? Vertraue niemand.
I'm Dark Maul. I mean, Chippy.
Bună, eu sunt Liza.
Tu nu erai nemțoică?
Sunt născută aici, în oraș.
Caut un băiat. Chippy, nu știu cum.
Tu înțelegi ce arme copilul ăsta dacă pune cineva mâna pe el care nu trebuie?
Vezi, dacă mai intri în probele aia, îți spun cătușe.
De-abia aștept.
Șeful, e nasoală rău treaba.
Asta e un joc făcut de mine. Se cheamă Ține Roșu. 3, 2, 1...
Îl aduci pe Chippy urgent și în secunda 2 ți-ai recuperat fata.
Nu te gândești la săracul Chippy?
Păi, Lisa, e copilul meu, ce dracu?
Adam, pierzi timp prețios.
Okay, so please welcome Anca, Miruna, Lăzărescu. Hello, Anca.
Hello.
Hello, nice to have you. So thank you very much for this wonderful story that you directed. I loved Hackerville, for example, very much, and I love the story about, of course, the hacking, but also that it's about two people from different genders and cultural backgrounds who work together. And maybe you can tell us something about the lead character of Hackerville, Lisa. How is this character reframing a female image, in your opinion?
First of all, I have to tell you that I share a lot of biographical details. I was born in Timișoara, and I was 10 and a half when I moved to Germany. And then I socialized and grew up here. So whenever I go to Romania, I feel like a German, and a lot of times in Germany, I feel like a Romanian. And on good days, I feel at home everywhere, and on bad days, I guess, nowhere. And this is a typical biography of someone who left too young to be a stable identity of one nationality, but too old already to not remember a lot of things that were really inside of you. So when I received the script, I realized there's a lot of chance of putting biographical experiences that I shared. So there's a lot of Lisa in me. For example, little stuff like, you know, to be a vegetarian in Romania is really a luxury problem because everyone is eating meat. So I had her, I gave her this nuts, you know, because due to this modern society rules, nuts are really super healthy, and you can do lots of monologues about nuts. So I let Lisa do some nuts. I wanted to create a very modern character. I mean, there was a lot already in the scripts, but I felt like the flavor and the deepness, it was missing. So what I tried is to have a modern but very ambiguous, sensitive character that is sometimes feeling lost, like in between the worlds. And this is something that I totally can share.
Mm-hmm. And how did you work with the lead actress to give her this? I find she has this kind of convincing and very calm presence throughout the whole show. How did you work with her?
First of all, she's a very talented actress. I was shooting my first feature film with her dad. So the real dad in Hackerville is her real dad. So this is an actor's family, and who also share a crazy story. They left in the 80s. So Anna grew up also in Germany. She brought a lot of authenticity because she has this accent, this German accent in Romanian, even though her mother language is Romanian, like mine. And there were all these little mistakes or misunderstandings that we took inside. So there was a frame, because you asked me about how I did work. I mean, there was a very clear frame in which she had a little bit of freedom. So whenever, this is how I love to work with actors. In general, I give them trust, and I give them a frame where they can feel really safe. But within this frame, they can try out, and then together sometimes we explore, and then magic is coming up on set.
Hopefully, yes. And do you think that a male director would have made maybe different decisions?
Well, as you've seen, Hackerville is directed also by a male, because we've been two. Igor, my colleague, and me, we were sharing, and yes, absolutely. There was a lot of discussions, also because Igor is, you know, from Romania, a Romanian director, and they considered me being a German director. And like I said, in Germany, a lot of times I'm the Romanian director. And then we realized, even though Andy Vasluianu, Anna's partner or Lisa's partner, He is an actor I did win so many awards with because he was my main lead in my very first short film, Silent River, actually my graduation film. And so I knew him since long, and I wanted him because I think he's the perfect Romanian. He's he's funny and witty and very warm-hearted, but of course also a little bit of a macho. And then we decided somehow, Igor and I, we talked a lot, but we kind of split. We split somehow who has the last word on what. And I got all the German part in the show, so to say, up until the point that I decided which watch Lisa was wearing. And he, of course, felt much more secure about the Romanian police and the Romanian part. So we discussed and decided nearly everything together, but the last word was shared, so to say, the creative last word. And it worked out.
Okay.
Also between us, me and him, there were a lot of different approaches. It's a little bit like a marriage if you really share a baby, like a show, and you really have to do compromises, but you have to find the ways who is good in what. And Igor was, always, he loved talking a lot and so on. It's not that I'm a calm person, but it's just that I felt like jumping in much more quicker, and I let the actors really play around. I'm much more playful. Igor, for example, loves to do jokes. I love the actors to do the joke, and I'm more like, maybe these are some cliches, but I really feel more like the psychiatrist at the set. You have to have really a lot of sensitivity for all these different stories and backgrounds of these actors, and of course of your team. And due to the fact that I had 2 marriages, I also co-directed with Mark Monheim, but that time I was lead for We Are the Wave for Netflix. It's very interesting because you never have the experience to watch another director if you do alone a film. Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting, and I wouldn't have expected to be so different as a male and a female director, but there are really big differences. Of course, it's also relied on character traces.
Yes, of course, but would you say in general, does a female director maybe have a better or deeper understanding of female characters and therefore maybe a worse understanding of male ones?
Definitely not a worse one, because usually as a female, you grew up with all these male characters around you, starting from your father, who is probably a very important figure for you, and then move on with all the relationships you fucked up or not, or whatever. So no, I would say that, and I would say it's a bit of a different understanding. What I can see a lot of times now, because I'm exploring how it is to get scripts offered. When I started, I wrote a lot of times, but I don't see myself in first place as a writer. I see myself as a director who does a lot of rewrites. And this might be also, for example, I'm working now on a film, and I had this script, and there was this female character who just jumped on the boy and, had on a wide field sex with him. And I was like, man, that's really interesting. And of course, it's a very nice visual scene, but why does she do it? And a lot of times you have really strange discussions if it is a male creator of this female world saying that, don't you know, women do this. And I'm like, yeah, of course it can be, but still, whenever a woman does this, there's a reason behind. Maybe she lost a bet, or maybe she was provoked, or maybe she feels lonely, or maybe she feels super full of self-esteem, but there's always a motivation. Let's just search for it. And I would say this is probably the biggest cliche you can have you know, a motivation for real sexual behavior, but there are also different other kinds of behavior. Why do you behave like this? And then I realized, well, you have to enter the discussion with your male character. And then a lot of things come up that you see that are totally different from the experience. And there are also a lot of misunderstandings or some cliches in your head, and you just have to discuss with the other one. And sometimes you do understand maybe also male behavior better whenever you look at your characters. It was very interesting. I had it with Igor, I had it with Mark, these discussions. I have it in this case with my co-writer.
But let's stick a little bit with the subject. Which typical male and female ascription get on your nerves the most? I mean, you started telling it already, but I'm still interested. What needs to be done to reframe this cliches that you were mentioning?
Sensitivity, I would say, and respect. Double thinking and dig deeper, man. This is probably, so whenever you are faced with someone, and it's definitely not only the male, it would be way too easy. If a lot of women do sexism too. There are so many prejudices, and whenever you hit such a prejudice, if it's coming from a female colleague of yours or a male, and it's just too flat or it's too simple, then I always say, stop. I would like to enter your world and understand, where is this coming from? Why do you judge the way you judge? Why do you think this character should do this cliche thing? Where does it come from? Or why? And there are so many people in the film industry. I mean, it's such a world where you very easily, you know, stamp someone. And whenever, you know, I hear that this actor is very heavy to work, or this colleague, or this DOP, or this director is very hard to work on, I'm always like a bit skeptical, and I'm like, I want to know why. And usually whenever you meet the other one who might be so difficult, you find out is being anxious, having really bad experiences, being afraid of a lot of things, and having really gone through a lot of crises. And this is something I experienced for male and female partners.
Mm. And what experiences do you have in the industry when it comes to trust and to big budgets for women film projects?
I would definitely say share it just from my point of view, and I guess I'm very lucky. I mean, probably they would never say it in your face. I will give a bigger budget rather to a male director than to you, but due to the fact that right from the beginning with my very first short film, I was doing already a co-production between Romania and Germany. Then my first feature film had a huge scene with tanks, and I'm the only female director in Germany who ever got tanks. And I got 6 tanks, and I always said, man, I will never shoot this film without Russian tanks, because the story doesn't work. And I'm also very interested in action scenes, and I love action scenes. I love working with the stunt coordinators. I really don't have any, I mean, I love it as a challenge to have like 2 or 3 units. With Netflix, I was controlling like 4 units, and I love this challenge. I see it as you know, directing sometimes, you know, being a general in the war. So I guess I have a lot of, I would say something so cliche, like a lot of masculine attributes. I guess there is something else they see in me than just thinking, should we give her the budget or rather give it to a male? I guess I'm booked, or I'm asked booked as a director. Also due to my experience.
Mm. Can you say something about the experiences with making films and having a family at the same time, about working conditions?
Yeah, it's impossible, but this is why I'm doing it.
So that should improve too, I think. And which key position do you think is the most important to support with female?
Let me say a word about family.
Yes, please.
Honestly, and doing films. Honestly, having kids and being able to shoot is definitely the best thing in this world. I don't think there's ever something better. So I fight for it whenever I can, and I think things are improving, for God's sake. There is a bigger sensitivity nowadays. Sometimes there's a set kindergarten, or sometimes the production asks you if you need a nanny. I mean, for God's sake, my kids are already a little bit older. They're 10 and 13, and they babysit themselves. But I think something like this should be just supernatural, because everyone, doesn't matter if it's a male or female director, people who do films but also have a family and raise up children are usually those who can really tell very sensitively, in a very sensitive mode, the stories. I mean, this is what makes us human. And for every artist who's able to also family, I only have respect and try to support him as much as I can. I
totally agree with you. And as the last question again, which key position do you think is the most important to push or to support concerning, of course, female filmmakers? Just that we know what we can do.
All, I mean, really all, but especially, of course, those who are, totally under the shadow of this male power. Like, of course, a director of photography, a female director of photography, a focus puller, or all these jobs that are usually really just for men. I would say need even more support. Support.
Okay, Anca, thank you so much. I love watching your work, and thank you so much for being with us and sharing your living room or whatever it is behind you. Thank you so much.
The rented apartment in Berlin for this production, yeah.
Thank you very much, Anca. Okay, so let's take a closer look on the situation in another country. My next guest is an expert on stereotypes in series, especially in Danish series. She is associate professor. She teaches at the University of Aarhus. She knows everything about media and communication, and she worked for the project What Makes Danish TV Series Travel, because they really do. And there she researched TV drama series as cultural export, transnational production and reception. So please welcome Dr. Phil Susanne Eichner.
Hello.
Hello. Great to have you. Hello. You're live from Copenhagen, I think, so it's great to have you here. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this incredible success of Danish series, especially with strong female lead characters. They're enormously successful. For example, Borgen, or The Legacy, or The Killing, and everything. So is gender equality simply a success factor?
The answer is very simple, yes, it really is. And we can say that, or I can say that, because we made it's a few years ago now, of course, but we made a quite big and worldwide audience studies, and we wanted to find out how do audiences in the world, not only in Denmark or Germany or the UK, but across the world, how do they perceive and how do they read the Danish television series? And a reason was, of course, to find out what are the circumstances that make the Danish television series travel from a production level, from different kinds of level, but a really important aspect was to look at the audiences. So we went to, for example, Turkey, Argentina, Japan, UK, Denmark, I already mentioned that, Australia, the US, and we asked audiences, what's so great? Why do you watch the Danish series? And there are, of course, it's a little bit more complex, and there are several reasons, but across the world, we could really see that audiences feel really attached to the series because they portray strong and ambivalent female lead characters, and they negotiate female topics.
Mm-hmm. So maybe you can define what makes a multidimensional female character a good one.
Well, that's I think that's not so easy to answer, because that, of course, depends on the kind of genre you're in and the story you're telling. But I guess maybe I can also knit that a little bit to your previous speakers and guests. It's, of course, a little bit about stereotypes. And the further away you go from just presenting a type, a stereotypical woman, and as soon as you go into portraying a person with her real problems and her situation, then your character becomes more layered, of course.
Can people learn to avoid stereotypes? Maybe you can say something about this Danish manifest, about this, where we have some hints.
I think they can. We have. I had to print it out. I printed it out before. It's manifested, and it's a very funny. It's a very funny read. I can only recommend it to all of you, and it has to be read in an ironical way. But what we can learn from that manifested is that it mirrors really the stereotypes that we have, and still incorporate and still apply. And of course, we as women are not naturally protected from having these stereotypes. So if you look at the manifest, it's so funny. The first paragraph said, remember that female characters should always be sympathetic and young, or are up to having sex. So in 40 points, this manifesto guides us through our own stereotypes and really puts a mirror in front of our faces. I think it's a very good and funny way to learn also about our own stereotypes and try to avoid them.
Yeah, and it seemed already have been successful in Denmark, this kind of teaching or avoiding. Would you say that the Danish society in general is more aware of gender equality with all its challenges?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I have to a little bit contextualize that, because Denmark has started with family politics 30 years ago, whereas Germany has done that maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So there is, of course, a difference, and it is different conditions in the society, and there are different very practical aspects that enable a family where both partners can still work, due to family politics, due to sufficient childcare, etc., etc. And I would say that had created, of course, a high awareness of gender and gender equality, and that also is like one of the big images that, positive images that Denmark is carrying in front of them. Yeah, but I would say now it's a little bit, at the same time, talking about gender trouble is a delicate issue here, because it would threaten all what has been achieved in Denmark already. So whereas there is a high gender awareness, but it's also a little bit, now it's a little bit like a rest. We rest on what we have achieved already, and I think it's really time to have a second wave of awareness.
So you think it's a little bit like being afraid that not everything is as good as they thought it was?
Yeah, I mean, there are some really good aspects. And if you look, for example, at the numbers of how many women are behind the camera, for example, on the line of producing, there is a really, really, the numbers are good. Yeah, yeah, there's a high percentages of women working in production and in also when you look at documentary, for example, as documentary directors. But there are also a lot of areas in society where there is no equality. And Denmark is a country that is very strong against quota regulations.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very interesting. So maybe see you in person one time in Berlin. Thank you so much so far.
Thank you.
Okay. And since we are already really deep down into this subject, Danish series, I'm very pleased to announce my next guest, who is a creator and a scriptwriter for the greatest Danish TV series like Borgen and Follow the Money, and also the incredible, impressive new social drama Cry Wolf. Please welcome Maja Juel Larsen. Hello. Hello, Maja. Hi, do you hear me? No, Maja, I don't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Now, live from, I think, Denmark somewhere. Thank you for joining us. Oh, wonderful. I wouldn't say it doesn't look like Copenhagen, but if you say it would be true.
Yeah, just a white room.
Okay, so we just heard a lot of interesting things about Danish series in general, and now we can talk to you as a writer. How do you build your multidimensional female lead characters? What are the most important features for them?
I think actually for my male and female characters, it's the same things that are important. I try to build characters that have both virtues and flaws. I try to build characters that have agency and something to strive for. And it's important for me that you don't have necessarily to sympathize with them, but you need to be fascinated by them.
And that's true for female and for male characters, you would say? Or is there something that you do different with the female ones?
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay. And how do people react on these female story drivers? What's your experience with that?
Well, I think they react very well, especially in these times. In Denmark, at least, I think actually most of the audience for TV shows and in the cinemas are actually women, which is interesting, being that there are still most men storytellers. But so there's definitely a big audience for female-driven stories, I think.
And how do you fight for your characters in, for example, the writer's room? I don't know if you work in writer's rooms, but...
I do work in writer's room. It was quite easy on Cry Wolf, being that I was the creator. So basically, they had to follow my lead. But I have had earlier to fight for female characters in the writing room. For the female characters to be nuanced, for example. Yes.
Can you say some more about that? Are there any stereotypes that you have to overcome, or is there anything special what you're fighting?
Yeah, I think I've thought about that. I think for me, it's often that female characters have to be very nice and helpful for the plot. That's something I really try to work with, that they have to be as flawed and interesting as their male counterparts. I've also, of course, experienced that they have to be attractive and sexy or things like that. As a main trait instead of them being an interesting person. So that's some discussions I've had. I've also had discussions about, could we make this character a female instead of a male? For example, to get in more female, different types of characters.
So maybe to become more specific, or even more specific, like, for example, discussion about how does a female character has to look, you wrote it or somebody else wrote it, and then it's about, you wrote it in this case, and then it's about she must be, she can't be older than 40 or something. Are really people saying that she can't be older than 40 because then nobody would watch it?
Actually, to be honest, I don't hear it that much in the writer's room, but I know it goes on in the casting room more. I've worked with a lot of quite nuanced male writers as well. But there's still often this fault that I said before, with the females being quite nice characters, that they have to be well behaved. That's something I've experienced quite a lot.
And how do you pay attention to diversity, for example, with people of color or persons with disabilities or the LGBT community? Mm-hmm.
For me, I think it's actually something we all have to be very alert about, because I think we all have blind spots. Mm-hmm. I think we've all been raised sexist and racist in some ways that we don't even see. So for me, it's very important also to be aware of my own blind spots and the director's blind spots, in that we always question, could this doctor be a young black female instead of an old white man, for example, or what I mean. Could this nurse be a disabled old man instead of a young woman? And it's something I think we all have to pay attention to, because I think it's grown into all of us from childhood, basically, because we've all seen many stories the other way around throughout our lives.
I know what you mean. And as a female writer, and talking of blind spots, as a female writer, do you think you have a better sensitivity for female characters?
I think I have probably for some certain aspects of being a woman, but I think we also have to be aware that it can be a quite dangerous route to take, that I can't, as a female writer, write interesting male characters and female characters. You know, stories are about human experience. I think that's the beauty of literature and film. And I think as a writer, I can write about someone being in prison, for example, without having experienced it myself. So in this discussion, we have to be aware, but we also have to understand that, for me, you know, we are writing about human experiences. And that can be written well by male or female, or yes, by all genders. When that is said, I do think that we definitely need a more diverse range of storytellers. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. I think everybody should be allowed to write everything she or he or whatever wants, but still we need more diversity. Can you tell us something about your favorite positive example of your own female characters that you wrote? Or maybe just your favorite character, you know?
Yeah. Right now, of course, I'm quite close to my female characters in Cry Wolf, my series, that are quite nuanced and flawed and interesting. I think it's a mother and a daughter who are the main characters. But being that it's a whodunit, I actually can't tell too much about what's going on with the characters, because there's a certain mystery in the series. Right now I'm working on vor und together with creator Adam Prise, and I think he's actually done, or we're doing a good job with the Prime Minister Birgitte Nyborg, the character name is. It's a series that explores corruption of power, and she, as the main character, is the one we explore this topic with. And I think she's a full-bodied and interesting character.
And is it true that a scriptwriter often or always is in every of his characters? A part of you is inside the persons you created?
Yes, definitely. That's why I also think that as a writer, I'm able to write, you know, a 14-year-old boy or a 50-year-old male or a 30-year-old woman, because you draw on something inside yourself, some human experience, or a certain, that's what you draw from, something within yourself.
And can you tell us which female characters in other series are your favorites, or ones that you enjoyed a lot? I bet there are several.
Yes, there are several. I thought about it yesterday. I remember when I saw Girls, the TV series, I really found that amazing to see. Also, you know, for all young women, that when this series came out, I thought it was quite groundbreaking, that they are so naked and raw and flawed and interesting. And of course, it's a series about being a girl, but it's much more nuanced than what we've seen earlier before that series. I also, at the moment, really enjoy Better Things, Pamela Adlon's series. It's also about being a woman in Hollywood, of course, about all these things that we are talking about. But also to mention a male writer, I really enjoyed Mad Men. I think the female characters in Mad Men are really interesting. Also, that they are in a time where they are completely unwoke as strong women. I think Betty Draper is very interesting. You know, she wants to be a pretty mother, and she's not really a quite good mother for her children. I think it's a really interesting portrait of a time where women were less woke. And Peggy's struggle in Mad Men as well, I find quite interesting.
Yes, I know what you mean. I think it's the best thing about this show, that it shows female characters from a time that they were where nobody showed them, and still.
Exactly.
It's wonderful.
And I think they are actually, for me, they were more interesting than the male characters in the show. I thought it was really great.
Do you think that a TV show can help to change things in societies, maybe also raise awareness or make people think about certain things?
Yes, I do actually think we have the power to do that. Together with, of course, what's going on politically. And I mean, we are able to be part of movements, I think. And I think it's very important that children from a young age see a diverse range of characters. I have a small son who's 4, so we watch a lot of TV shows for children, and it's still amazing when you see, or it's appalling when you see old TV shows, how gender stereotypes they are. So I think there's a very important battle in that, and I think it does affect the world, yes, definitely.
And do we have an example for that? Maybe a show that had an influence on maybe the Danish society?
Yeah, actually, I'm working on vor und as well right now, so it's on top of my mind. But it has done some very interesting things. It came out before we elected our first female prime minister, and I think it did something good for her along the way. And also, vor und is it's had a really big success out in the world, and it's traveled to countries where there's not a lot of diversity in the governments. And I think it's done a really great job at promoting a female prime minister. So I think that's actually done some good out there. Yeah.
Okay, we all hope that. So thank you, Maja, so much for sharing your insights and your information. Thank you so much, and best wishes to Copenhagen. Thank you.
Thanks for welcoming me. Have a nice day. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. So next on our show is a wonderful guest, a woman who is a versatile actress with lots of experience, and you may have seen her on Coronation Street, amongst other things. But she's also an activist. She's a co-founder and member of Disabled Artists Network and Community, DANC. Please welcome Cherylee Houston.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Cherylee. So maybe let me say some more things about DANC. This is a project run by the arts organization CCC, and it's for disabled artists, by disabled artists, and promotes two-way conversations between disabled artists and key industry professionals. Maybe you say something about this organization. Why did you co-found this CCC organization?
Because I've been a disabled artist for over 25 years, and I have experienced so many blocks myself, and I didn't want the next generation of disabled people to have the same blocks I had in accessing the arts and also accessing our dreams. DANC is an organisation we created 2.5 years ago. We have now over 900 disabled artists, actors, dancers, writers, musicians, photographers, and we come together so the industry know where to find us, and it's really working. We're advertising job opportunities each week. We're connecting production companies with disabled talent. We're progressing disabled writers through. So it's about having a two-way conversation, discovering what the blocks are, creating a solution together and moving it forwards.
Mm-hmm. So maybe just now, are you satisfied at the moment with the level of diversity that the roles, your roles provide for you?
Am I happy with them? No. I think I was trying to think of a better way to answer that, but no. Disability is 1/5 almost of the population, and we are not being represented on our screens in that way. People still get surprised when they see a disabled actor on their screens. Probably in most countries you can name all the disabled actors you know on one hand, and that's just not enough, and that's not fair on our disabled young people, and that's not fair by not providing role models to ensure people can achieve what they want to achieve in life.
So in which ways is the situation different being a disabled actress and not an actor, or is it not different?
Weirdly, when we were talking about this the other day, I realised a lot more female disabled actors are getting work. And that's really interesting, because I don't know what that means about our presence on screen, because that also says a lot about what society judges disability as, and is that about the male thing of it not being acceptable. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot about disability that isn't considered acceptable, or we've all got a lot of subconscious bias, and we've all got preconceived ideas of how disabled people were viewed 20, 50 years ago, and that carries on our screens. And I think it's really important that we become responsible for, because as storytellers, we are telling society back their stories, and currently at the moment, society we're regurgitating those stories that disabled people aren't really of value, and haven't got stories to tell, or they're always a victim, or they're, you know, there needs to be a lot more work in this area.
Can you say some more about that? You mentioned victims or other stereotypes. Maybe something about these roles that you get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've been in my job for 11 years now in a continuing drama. Prior to that, as an actor with a disability, I'd probably only ever auditioned for one role which wasn't disabled. And that it's really weird, because a disability is just a bit like the same as hair colour. It's just a given circumstance. But I think currently we still see it as a character trait, and it's not a character trait. My personality, you know, I could be a lover, a mother, a robber. I could, you know, there's so many things I could possibly play, but quite often the industry think that it's playing this, playing disability. And also the problem is, from a non-disabled point of view, that's seen as tragedy, or that's awful, and gosh, wouldn't that be horrible if that happened to me? But as a disabled person, you've got over all that. You're quite happy with it. It's actually given you a lot of different qualities in life, that I'm a very different human being than I would be if I wasn't disabled. So it has taught me an awful lot. But I think it's really important to represent us and represent our stories, because there's such an exciting creative choice with disability. It means that we're going to tell a story in a different way, and that's what we're always hungry for, is to see new stories and new angles and lifestyles. So yeah, it's really, really important to increase representation.
And I bet you hear a lot from casting directors, for example, I'm sorry, but the role doesn't require a wheelchair. So what do you answer them?
It's that thing, I think that's the subconscious bias, is realising that actually I could play many roles, as could many of my disabled peers. You know, a visually impaired actor doesn't have to play roles just about the fact that they can't see very well. A deaf actor shouldn't be playing roles about that they can't hear very well. It's all a bit dull, all those stories. Do you know what I mean? That I think we got to start clearing off that layer, and what you need to do is the producers should, when the script arrives on a desk, this is something we've really learnt through Dank, is that look through, talk with the writer and see which of those characters could be played by an actor with a disability, if it's not a key thing that's not, you know, that's not going to impact on that. And then also when you get the best actor for the job, then talk to the actor about where their access will impact on that storyline, which is a much easier way of doing it, because otherwise what we're doing at the moment is deciding a disability to attach to a character, and because our industry isn't employing people, that has this massive ricochet effect where people aren't being trained, people aren't seeing it as a job, so therefore it's even harder to find a very specific disability. So if you then find the best actor for the role, you could go in access groups. You could maybe go, you want somebody with mobility, you want somebody with physical impairment, you want somebody with a hearing impairment, then bring them into the role and see what they can inform the script. It doesn't need massive changes at all.
So what do you think about not disabled actors who play disabled characters?
Not a lot. To me, it breaks me out of it stops it being true. Do you know what I mean? The problem is, again, that thing of the given circumstance, and subtext is always about, oh, this is awful, this would be terrible, because they think it would be. Whereas me in my wheelchair, I'm getting from A to B. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. And you can see it just, they're stereotypes. Of course they're stereotypes, because it's lived experiences. And also they're playing the stereotype that our industry is playing on the screen for them to think that that's what it's like to be, you know, seeing somebody play visually impaired and then, you know, stare straight ahead the whole time, or bump into things on purpose, or see somebody using a wheelchair like that. It just makes you go, oh, you haven't got a clue. And then that stops it being true. You know what I mean? Whereas if you get a disabled actor to play those parts, they're going to concentrate on the character rather than all this peripheral stuff that really jars on screen.
Mm-hmm. So what was your own important step through the doors, if you may say so, to get into this job?
Yeah, it took a long time because of my disability. I got refused roles. I think I had 12 telecredits before I could get an agent to take me on. I think things have changed an awful lot in recent times. I think one of my key jobs was probably Little Britain, and then after that my job is on Coronation Street, which is a continuing drama in the UK, and that really has made a difference because it's given me a voice. It's allowed me to have the platform to talk about these issues, which is, you know, and I'm so fortunate with that job because they took me on board, and they don't write about disability, they write about the character.
Okay, so as a last question, the goals for DANK, how would you say, what are the DANK goals on a European level maybe for this network?
We would love, next year we are talking about reaching out to see how we can start DANK in Europe, because what we've done is create a fantastic blueprint where we have connected disabled artists from all over the country. We are connecting them with production companies, broadcasters, producers. So it means that we've created this network. So it means that it isn't the industry's responsibility to make that change. It isn't our responsibility to make that change. It's about having conversations and changing it together, taking away the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of not even knowing where to start. We can help you. You know, it's lived experience. We know how to do it. And if we don't, we will know somebody who does. So if we can take that to Europe and create a Europe-wide hub and connect all the disabled artists and all the industry who want to have those conversations and make those changes, because it's just about having a ripple effect. It's about making a pledge to make a change today and going, okay, I'll take my first step. I will have a conversation. Because as soon as you start having conversations, you take away the fear.
That's a wonderful last word. Thank you so much and good luck with everything. I really wish you the best. Thank you for being here, Cherylee. Thank you.
If anybody wants to talk to us about it, we are welcome to have a conversation. Thank
Yes.
you. Bye-bye.
We're going to start the conversation. We're doing it just now. So I learned a lot, but of course not enough. So therefore, there's a part 2 of this event. And in the next part of this show, we are going to talk to women who are experts on the situation behind the camera. And I will take you on a journey through Europe to explore the quota discussion from a European perspective. And in the studio to give us some data and some facts about the EU status quo, I'm pleased to welcome back Pro Quote Film chairwoman Barbara Rohm and agent and actress Chun Mei Tan.
Yes, hello. So let's start and have a look at the report of the German Director Guild about the diversity for directors. And as we can see on sheet number 1, I hope you can see sheet number 1. You can see that. That's not the first sheet, but it's okay. Okay, you can see that for television, the female directors, it increases since 2013, slowly, but it increases. Meanwhile, the female directors for cinema completely stagnates.
And this is also, when we have a look at the second sheet, we can see that this is also reflected by the film funding money. Since 2007, only 10% of the nationwide money every year is invested in films made by women. But where are the women, and are they not educated at film schools, Chun Mei?
Well, of course they are educated, but only half of the young women who are graduated at the film university in German works as a female filmmaker professional. So we can see that the female potential is completely ignored. When we look at the other hand, that male professional filmmakers are more than graduated male filmmakers. So that's due on the many changes, career changes. But Barbara, what's the reason?
Yes, so there's a huge study made by the German film funding film funder FFA, and the study clearly shows that there are reasons, and when we look at the next sheet, we have the reasons, and it's above all the risk aversion and discouragement of male and female decision makers, but also the still prevailing stereotypes in male connotated job profiles. Risk aversion means that decision makers prefer to work with those filmmakers and promote substances, genres, and tonalities that pose the least risk. One promotes what seems to have already proven itself, one avoids new types of forms, other conflicts, ensembles, and tonalities, and also accepts the danger of repeating oneself again and again. So, but let's have a deeper look now with our experts, and please, Jenni, welcome our guests.
Thank you very much. Yeah, for a keynote to this very complex subject, I have a wonderful guest from Ireland. I'm looking forward to her. She's a writer and a publisher and an expert for women in the international film industry, and she is the chairwoman of WITF Ireland and member of Equality Action Committee. Please welcome first for the keynote and then for an interview, Susan Liddy. Hello, Susan. Can you hear me? Susan? Hello, Susan, you're on. Hello to Ireland, Ireland calling. Susan, I can scream, but I think it wouldn't make sense.
Hear us. So, but yes.
Susan, hello.
But I think Susan is waiting for us, but
yeah,
but maybe you
can send her a very loud email.
No, but you can introduce maybe her work because she published a very interesting.
Yeah, she wrote a wonderful book that's called "Women in the International Film Industry: Policy, Practice, and Power." And now she's on.
No, now she gets a phone call that she's on.
I think she.
Maybe it's about policy, practice, and power. Of course, this book is about gender equality in film, and she researched a lot of different levels of that and made this book. I think it's a quite actual book, but now she looks like she's getting us. Yeah. Maybe there's another. Maybe it's the time. Maybe she's on another time on the Irish time.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Susan. Great to see you.
How are you? I am so sorry that something had to go wrong, and I see something else is wrong too, in that my husband's name, I've had to use his laptop, is on my, is showing up on my screen. So this has not been a great beginning, so let's hope that it's going to get better from here on. Apologies.
It's a wonderful beginning. We are waiting for your keynote, so please.
Okay. Yes, so thank you very much indeed, and thank you for having me. I'm very grateful and very pleased to be here. I'm going to just speak briefly about my book, Women in the International Film Industry, Policy, Practice and Power. And this is a collection that I put together drawing on many countries across the world. I should say not all of the regions I was able to get, not all of the voices I was able to include. So I'd like to acknowledge that. But I guess what prompted me to do it was that I know that we have excellent reports coming out here and there. We have annual statistics. We have all that information. But I felt to gather all these voices of researchers and activists and what was going on in countries that we never even thought about thinking, you know, we think of our own country, we think probably of Hollywood, we probably think about Sweden because it was such a pioneer, but very often we haven't got a clue what's going on elsewhere. And I thought we would get great depth if I brought them together. And I suppose I'm concerned as well about the way that women's activism can be devalued and doesn't sort of fit into the scheme of things, and also the way that women's activism can get lost over time. I'm very concerned about that. And indeed, many of the contributors talk about activism in the 1970s. And of course, you know, all of those things in a way are lost in the mists of time, and that concerned me. So I suppose this book is also about a record, having a record, so that policymakers, all of those involved in the industry, as well as students and researchers coming up, have this. I'm not saying mine is the only record, please understand. I'm saying that in one place we have captured all these things, and I think that's extremely important. I want it to be a global conversation also. I think that we can strategize very well together. And I think we've seen by the powerful global movements like Time's Up, Black Lives Matter, Me Too and all of that, that we are stronger together. And I think that's what we need to do now. We can keep working away on our own patch, but we also need to understand that we can learn from each other, and we can sort of work better, I think, together. So I suppose some of the things to say really is that there are similarities that I identified, unfortunately, and some of those similarities are not so uplifting. Across the world, women are, I suppose you can see a gender order in operation. Women tend to be devalued and sidelined, and that manifests itself in the difficulties of getting funding, first of all, which we know about. It also means that when they do get funding, they're being funded for short films, they're being funded for smaller documentary, lower budget films, not the big money. The big money does not come the way of women very easily, unfortunately. And that tends to be a general picture. I suppose the structural problems are there, individual women, there's so much going on that it is a nonsense to say women don't apply, which is still being said, by the way. Women are not applying, what can we do? And I would think that is a nonsense. The structural problems that are there around all kinds of things, like the perceptions of who the leaders are, who should be getting funding, the fact that in a way, despite everything, it is still a boys' club, and film sets can be quite unsafe spaces for women. Women have a whole lot of things going on in their lives, particularly too. Issues about caring, issues about motherhood. They might all seem maybe sideline issues, but they're not. I think they're fundamental issues that are blocking women's path, and I'm only touching on a few of the things now. So I think there are big structural problems there. What are the issues? We need to deal with so many things in order to give women a way in, I think. I think funders play a hugely important part. And in countries that are doing well, when I say doing well, doing reasonably well, that have initiatives in place, that have gender policies in place, in those countries there is a lot of thanks to be given to those funders for at least taking the issues on, and for the activists, of course, who pushed for those issues, and I don't think we can ever forget that. But even though that is all going on, it's very, very, very slow. This is the problem. And I think that there are some fundamental questions we need to ask each other, and that is, are we happy with the pace of change? Are we happy that that it will get better if they just keep moving along nice and slowly? I'm unconvinced about that. I think we need to be asking, are there ways, for instance, and just to take one example, production companies, are there ways that national funders who are using public money, or EU money, for instance, is there a way that money should perhaps be given only if there is a requirement that you do certain things that will promote the policies in Europe and in your local industry, rather than being encouraging? Is it time to step up and say, well, let's take a slightly harder line here? I know that people are very nervous about quotas. They don't like the word quota. So that's okay. We don't have to use that word if you don't want to use it. But can we then say, various funders don't have a problem with using the term targets? Well, that's okay. Let's use the term target. But let's say, how are you going to monitor your target? Is there a timeline? Because there has to be. We can't just amble along without a roadmap, I think, anymore. We need to say, where's the timeline? How are you going to get to 50-50? And we need funders to take the lead on that. I don't know how I'm going time-wise, so maybe I need to stop now, do I?
But I could listen to you much longer. Maybe you can say something about, do you think we need more rules, regulations, laws to force all these things, to force the change to become faster?
I think that, again, I know all the issues that are there. Oh, you can't bring laws in, and you can't, what about quality? And we know all of these issues are commonly referred to. But I just think we have to decide, like, are we really running with this now? Because there's a lot of energy, a lot of work not only from activists, but also from public funders around the world who are trying their utmost. But it's not enough. It's not enough to force the pace of change. And my worry is that we're going to fall back into into the way it was before. Because, you know, in Ireland, we're doing really quite well now. But 5 years ago, we weren't. I wouldn't ever like to see my country sliding backwards. We want to move forward. So if we cannot move forward simply by step after step, then perhaps it's time to say, let's review it. Laws seem harsh to the ear, don't they? But maybe just reviewing what best practice should be. And I think when you're talking about money, it's a case of if people want money and their funders have policies, then you cannot just give the money to them if they are not adhering and respecting your policy, because it is public money. So that's what I would say there.
Mm. And you said already you research different countries, and they all have, of course, different cultural backgrounds. How important is that in our common struggle?
I mean, it is true to say that countries are at various stages. So a country like Nigeria doesn't gather statistics about nearly anything, I gather. And their concerns about, let's say, very stereotypical representations of women on screen, that would be a key issue there. And actually that concern would be echoed about the Italian industry also, very sexualized, stereotypical images. Nonetheless, you know, they're coming from different places, but I'll come back as an example in Ireland. 5 or 6 years ago, nobody asked any questions much about who were we looking at on screen? Where were the female protagonists? Who were they? In 5 years, that has probably become the most successful thing I think we have done. We have focused on both funders, activists, filmmakers, have focused on who are we looking at? Whose stories are we watching? What kinds of characters are these? And I think a fundamental change has happened on screen. So I'm saying like that change can happen. Even if a country is at a different stage now, change can happen. And, you know, with focus and with the right people on the ground, it can happen reasonably quickly.
Do you have any good examples from other countries? Maybe people in countries?
Well, you know, I'm very loath to say this is a good example and this one is not, simply because we are all coming from different places, and you don't want to identify the best person in the class type of thing, you know. I would say, you know, the Nordic countries, you know, do come out well. They usually come out well in everything. But many other countries are really trying very hard and being very public about their attempts. So I would say that, you know, Australia have been very forceful in what they want to do. They've also been criticised because, you know, you will have people who go, it's not fast enough, and I understand that. But, you know, even with Australia, the argument goes, you have done really well maybe in the head count, you haven't done so well in the amounts of money that's been given out. So that is a kind of a problem as well. And that's what I mean is we're not looking at like with like. In Ireland, we've done better with headcount, but similarly, if you look at the money that women are getting, it is not the same. And this is a huge, huge gap, I think, across the world. So I think that I'm not as concerned about the countries who are trying, because I think we can hopefully amplify their efforts. But obviously, countries that are like Portugal, for instance, that don't have statistics yet, or they're not treated and readily available for activists to look at and monitor, that's more problematic, I think, because you must have the statistics. You must be able to monitor those, and they have to be a public debate about them. And I think, you know, we're kind of caught between being real and being positive. We all want to be positive and believe things will get better, but we also have to be real and say, this is the pace of change. It's not what we would want. How can we do better?
Do you have any examples of countries where diversity is a kind of rule already? You know, if you have to, maybe that you have to apply certain rules to get money or something?
I think diversity is slower showing up. That is my experience. I know that it's not that it doesn't show up in the wishes of the contributors, but I think that diversity has not come to the fore to the same extent as gender equality is. I know that here in Ireland we are only beginning to talk about that now, and I think it is going to be a very big concern going forward. But I think you have to. Up to this time, when I got involved in the situation here in Ireland, you're looking at the population and you're seeing that Irish women are like 51 or 2%, and that was the starting point. Do you know what I mean? Now, would I like to see a situation where, you know, all the Irish women, even if we got to 50%, that we were all coming from the same place? Absolutely not. So I would think there that, you know, the idea of having 50-50 is a good one, but within that 50%, we absolutely must have diversity of voice. I'm talking about ethnicity, class, age, all kinds of backgrounds must have voice there, I think. But I think we are only beginning to talk about that, and it comes through in the desires of some contributors, but it isn't perhaps as loud or as amplified as it will become.
Maybe we get a little bit more specific. Did you identify in your research specific structural patterns or problem patterns for all this subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have an industry that does its business in a particular way. So you have that informal hiring, that sort of, you're hiring the people that you know and you got on with, and women are not in that loop sometimes, so that's a problem. Other problems would be just perceptions that linger about, you know, who can drive projects forward, who are the best people to get together for the job, who knows who. So there were many of those kinds of things. And of course, they impact funding. And also, of course, coming up all the time again and again is the denial of structural issues. That when women come out of film schools, you know, ready more or less to do work, that there are these barriers within the industry that will not even, in other words, a path has not been forged for them to walk along. I think it's very problematic. And I think, as I said, other things like perhaps unconsciously understanding, and this is a big topic here at the moment because I'm doing research on motherhood and caring, on parenthood as well, generally, is that, you know, nobody's talking about it. So in film schools, you are hearing people go, why are those students who are wonderful at directing, why have they gone into producing? And I think some of those are uncomfortable subjects that need to be raised nonetheless, and probably need to be raised there before industry happens. And that is that there are barriers around issues to do with family that do fall disproportionately on women, and that, you know, issues around sexual harassment and all of that, and uncomfortable film sets, all of those things. Just because we don't talk about them doesn't mean that women aren't internalizing them when they are making career choices. And I think all of those are in the mix.
And as much as I absolutely agree with everything you say, there's of course still a big discussion about victimizing, for example. How do you avoid or prevent that women may just say, oh, you know, I just don't get my film done because I'm a woman and not because the film is not good?
Yes, look, I hear you. I don't know what to say. It's an industry that, you know, is a rejection industry. People get dreadful letdowns and, you know, disappointments all the time. And every time that I speak about it, I have to say, I do preface by saying, you know, there isn't going to be happy ending for everybody in the audience. There just isn't. Some people's projects are going to get through and others are not. But when you look at the facts and the figures, you kind of go, it can't be a coincidence that all the people who are getting the projects through, or the vast majority of them, are male. So yes, there will be some people, and you know, you will have some people who are always giving out about that. You'll have some men who are giving out that their project didn't go through. That's the nature of the industry. So I think, you know, we just have to accept that, you know, people are going to be upset and allow them be upset. But the figures, I think, speak for themselves. Women are not getting through, and very often it is because, sometimes it is because the project isn't ready. Absolutely it is. That is the case. And other times it's because of a lot of other, you know, unconscious things that lead to forms of bias. But I mean, I suppose what I would like to see is, certainly in an Irish context, many more projects in development to give the time to bring many more women through. Some of those won't make it to production, but I think if there's enough of them in development, you will eventually get enough of them through, so that younger and also not so young, new or young women looking on will say, there is a place in this industry for me, because look at so-and-so and so-and-so, and they have come through. I think the problem at the moment is the industry doesn't seem to belong to women. You can't see yourself there. You can't see yourself on the screen for the most part. You can't see yourself when you look around. And then when it comes to making choices, hard choices about whether you're prepared to slog on that path, because it is a hard road, it is a hard business. But when it comes to making those choices, if you feel the scales are weighed against you, chances are you're not going to go down that route, and instead you're going to step to the side and say, I'll produce. I'll also be in the industry, but I will have more autonomy and more power for myself. And I think that's perhaps what is going on.
So we are all helping with the visibility at the moment. But maybe you can, as a last question, tell us something like a list. What is there? What do we have to change first? You know, where do we have to put our energy first if we want more equality? Change directing positions, film funding. Who should we address?
I think the thing is that it cannot be addressed in one way. And you know the way sometimes when the awards are announced at various things, you know, around the world, and everybody gets very annoyed and says that's a disgrace. And you know, I'm not saying it isn't a disgrace at times, maybe it is, but the point is that that's too late to start giving out. So you have to go way back. So you do have to go back, as I say, into film schools, and you do have to actually stop pretending that these problems do not exist in the real world. We need to open the dialogue and acknowledge that there are problems and there are systemic problems, and that we need to engage with those problems. So that's the first thing I think we need to do. I think we also have to help women to get into the industry by encouraging, you know, more development, more short films, all of those things. But we have to be very careful that we're not ghettoizing women within the short film area, because we're finding that, you know, women going on to make the feature, that is the big jump. And once you've made that jump, of course, the huge jump is women going on to make a second film. So I suppose, and as well as the host of other issues I'm talking about, motherhood and the safety around the industry and all of those things. So sometimes it might seem to be an enormous thing, because actually we need to be operating on all of those levels. And I think activists always have power at grassroots level to shine a light on what needs to be done. But ultimately, we're back to public funders have the power, and they have the power to decide where their budget goes. It's never enough money, I know, and I know many of them are doing their best, but it's a case of reimagining every so often, stopping and reimagining, and not just keeping on a trail that seems to be getting us nowhere very fast, really. So it's about engaging all of us in a reimagining and a reappraising of how we're doing business. But as I say, I think we're always going to be, you know, having to throw our energy into a number of places, because I don't think any one place is going to solve everything.
Okay, Susan, thank you so much for your visions and your energy and everything you just said. I could listen to you forever, but thank you so much. Best wishes.
Thank you so very much for having me, and apologies for the technical hitch at the beginning. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It was fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So for every claim and every change that we demand, of course, we have to know exactly what are the numbers behind everything. So my next guest is an expert on data about gender equality. She works for the Global Union Media, Entertainment and Arts, UNIME, and published the handbook and study Achieving Gender Equality and Promoting Diversity in the European Audiovisual Sector. She's exactly what we need. Please welcome Daphne Tepper. Hello, Daphne. Hello.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
Hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Maybe you can give us the steps to the framework you have been set for your handbook as a start.
Yes, the handbook on good practices in the field of gender equality and diversity in the European audiovisual framework was prepared in the context of a European partnership carried out by a number of important stakeholders in the film and broadcasting industry. And it was the follow-up of an agreement, an EU framework of action on gender equality that was concluded by those organizations in 2011. So namely employers' organization, public and private broadcasters, as well as producers, and then representative organizations of the professionals working in the sector, actors, technicians, journalists. And so several years after adopting this document, they decided to go back to the question, monitor the developments in the field, and explore also the question of diversity. So they implemented a research for several years on the situation across Europe, particularly off-screen. They surveyed, they interviewed their members, and then the outcomes of this research was published in this handbook. And the whole process received the support of the European Commission, and it will feed the work of the European social partners on the topic of equality and diversity in the years to come.
And why is the knowledge about data so important for gender equality, in your opinion?
Well, I think it was said before, but because what you do not see does not exist. And an important conclusion of our research was that the awareness, even among sector professionals, about the imbalance in women representation and the discriminations against women in the industry was still way too low. And that when starting conversations about the issue, we always had to start with data and numbers to turn that perception around. And when we showed the data available of women in key artistic positions, of women across the entire workforce, of the gender pay gap, when numbers were available, numbers that are most of the time very shocking, the sense of urgency came back and we could enter a constructive discussion. And also, as Susan said, data is also key to achieve any progress, because we have realized that if actions and strategy had already been worked on and adopted in the sector for around a decade, achievements were in general way too timid and not monitored closely enough. And in many situations, it was as if the adoption of the strategy was seen as the key action and that nothing else had to be implemented afterwards. But we know that adopting a strategy is actually the starting point, and only if you have targets and a regular monitoring and a regular reporting process will progress be achieved.
Mm-hmm. So what, in your experience, what helps to ensure that gender equality is not played off against diversity?
I believe that gender equality and diversity strategies and action plans should be implemented in parallel, with some important elements that they share, with a lot of important synergies, but also with the need to clearly distinguish targets and evaluation process. The synergies, they are obvious. I believe that gender equality and diversity, they have the same premises. When we look at ourselves as an industry, as a workforce, and as a producer of content, we realize that we still don't reflect fully our societies. And so therefore working on bringing more women in the sector, but also ensuring a greater variety of profiles and backgrounds of those women. And if we don't do that, we would dramatically miss an opportunity to implement change. There are also a lot of important synergies when you implement change and new processes that promote equality that can also help bring in more people from different backgrounds and with more diverse profiles. The intersectionality and the double and sometimes triple forms of discrimination suffered by some individuals are also, of course, to be taken into account at all times when developing equality and diversity strategies. However, I also think that it's important to keep the actions on parallel and separated tracks, because indeed there is a risk to see the topic of gender equality eclipsed or downplayed by the one of diversity. In many countries, diversity targets are difficult or cannot be established, but gender equality ones can be. So we should make sure both strategies don't compete with each other, but on the opposite, that they reinforce each other.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You researched a long time for your book. You said that already earlier. What surprised you in this research the most?
It was mentioned before, it was the very unequal situation in the different EU countries. Some countries are already very advanced in collecting data, in adopting strategy, while others still have almost nothing in place. But also this is changing. You can see a push in many countries, and that will hopefully take the form of more concrete actions in the years to come. Also, what surprised me is the diversity of ways the Me Too movement was received and impacted the audiovisual sectors and societies in the different EU countries. In some countries, it was massive and had almost immediate repercussions. Of course, we can speak about the UK, Germany, Sweden, and in others, the impact was more progressive. That's the case, for example, in France, with a first round of discussion on equality, and the discussion on violence and unsafe situation for women on set came in only in a second wave. And in other countries, the impact was very minimal, and it's the case, for example, in some Eastern European countries. But we can see that this is not too late. And for example, in some countries of Latin America, for example, the Me Too movement is emerging now. So maybe it can still affect change in more countries in the years to come.
And of course, it must be very important to give all these countries all the information that you just gathered together. You found so many things. How do you do that? How can you spread this information to every country that needs it?
Well, first of all, thanks to those kind of invitations. So thanks a lot for having me here. We have a rather strong network of partners. So the European organizations that are behind this project all have members across the EU and sometimes even beyond the European Union. So what we are doing now is that we are working each organization with their own members that are public and private broadcasters, producers, actors unions, technicians unions, etc., etc. We are discussing the topic, we are sharing information, we are sharing good practices, and we are also, of course, reaching out to other important stakeholders in the sector, as it was mentioned before, the film funding agencies, the public broadcasters who have an important role in commissioning a lot of content as well. And so the idea now is just to get the conversation going.
And we had that a little bit earlier. Would you say that laws and regulations, for example, questionnaires about gender and diversity before you get the funding for a film or something like that, can it help, things like this?
Yeah, I believe they are extremely important and necessary because they serve the purpose of changing the industry long term and changing minds and processes, because it's always easier to get back to the way we always used to work, to not challenge the statu quo. Bringing in more diverse profiles in our workforce and more diverse stories on our screens, it demands an effort and new types of actions, and actions that are in general not sustained in the long term if there is not an obligation to do so. So I really believe it's very important. I also believe, like something that Procrote has been saying for many years, and of course I agree, public funding should not benefit to some people only. It should be equally distributed, and it should serve to bring more inclusion and equality in the sector as a whole.
But that's, of course, all of these things are, of course, very hard to achieve. We all know that. We are working on it. Are there maybe any easy advices you could give, or something that you, don't know, can just say, and then we all say, oh, yes, I never thought of that next time?
Well, I think that we can all do something at our level, and we have to keep in mind that something is wrong, and that we make sure to act at any level, at our level, to affect change. Because, as I said, if we really want to have long-term change, we have to change the culture and change our daily way of working and our structure. So everyone has a role to play. We all have to fight our own traditional biases and never lose sight of the objective. And I also believe that we have to fight for ourselves and the others, never let go even the smallest battles. For example, when negotiating a salary, when you are a woman, or when recruiting new colleagues, questioning the recruitment processes and the informality for very often in our sector of those recruitments, when deciding of the timing of a meeting, 7 p.m. might not be very practical, for example, for carers, be them men or women. So all those actions have an impact on gender equality and inclusion, and we should think about them every day.
And on a very active level, some kind of, I don't know, what do you think about activism? What can we really do, not only wish it, but really go somewhere and do something?
I think activism starts in your own workplace. So not letting go of, of biases, of prejudice, even the ones that you think at a more low level ones when you see them. I think that's what you have to fight for yourself and the others. I think we also have to require changes on the workplace, in relation, for example, to safe workplaces and the prevention of violence. There are very small steps we can take there to make sure that everyone knows the laws and everyone knows the protocols. If something happens, everyone knows that we will take care of each other if anything happens. And then we should also, as it was mentioned, make sure that our public funder know about the situation, have targets for women representation and diversity targets in our productions, and that the whole system works together to achieve changes soon and not in 10 years.
So do you think the next study that you're going to present to us will be very different?
Hope so. I seriously hope so. I think we know we are in there for the long ride, so of course we will not expect miracles knowing how slow change has been, but I also see a lot of energies coming out from activism, but also from the workplaces themselves. So I really hope that the next 5 years will be important years on those issues.
Maybe as a last question, just going back once again, when you started this study, could you also take data from years ago or very long ago? Could you use data from the 50s, 60s, 70s too?
It was very difficult because one of the conclusions of the study is that as it was said before, to achieve change, you have to monitor progress, you have to have data that you can compare, and this whole exercise started very, not a long time ago. So it was very difficult for us to get data, to have a perspective on the issue. But I really think that is something that will change, that now there is a commitment from a lot of stakeholders to actually collect this data and make sure that we have a view on the situation. So hopefully, if you invite me again in 10 years, I'll be able to tell you that it changed for the better.
We will definitely do that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great having you here. Thank you, Daphne. So, last but not least, we have a wonderful guest and activist who is a consultant to film industry and member of European Women's Audiovisual Network, EWA. Please welcome Tamara Tatishvili. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having us here. We're delighted to this continuous cooperation with Pro-Porter Film.
Thank you. So let's talk about activism. We started a little bit early with Daphne some minutes ago, but let's talk about activism. What supports the visibility for women in film?
I think I've listened to all the great speakers that you had, and somehow I feel like we need to put a very complex puzzle together, and this really responds to the kind of field we are collectively in, working for achieving a change in gender equality, and how are we actually doing it? And that's also very close to the heart of European Women Audiovisual Network that I represent. It is probably largely in recent years through activism, and that is not a general clause. It's a policy or action of thorough campaigning that brings political or a social change. And that, unfortunately, is not a cake that we're going to bake overnight and not even in 1 week. But this is this complex process of promoting, for advocating, and sometimes being very persistent for the change that brings better values to the society. And campaigning for that, I think, is something that made this agenda visible and more vivid. We have to give a credit to what has been achieved. Organizations like yours, like many others that you have invited as guests, really contributed vastly to the visibility of the malfunction of the equality in our screen industry, I would say. But that, of course, does not mean that we have achieved the target, but we are at least there, out and loud, I believe, to try to understand that enough has been collected, I would say, to think that now it is time for a practical action.
And what could that practical action be? Should it be more force or more pressure to politics, for example, or to politicians?
I think this, of course, also differs from one country to another. But my personal viewpoint is that the change happens horizontally and vertically. And the real change can stay if you have an access to the power and the decision making. And that means that we have to, of course, understand what does it mean when we talk about the elements that make the agenda of gender equality. So let's maybe try to shortly get practical about it. So that is access to funding and equal pay. So it means that there can be a lot of practical action in place by relevant institutions that work on the inequality that exists. It is about combating stereotypes, representation, and the role models, which is another set of action that has to be taken, and the systemic gender discrimination, which has been there for very long, as we all know, and the two previous speakers of yours did mention some examples around it. I think that we need to challenge policymakers. Yes, that's the role of the activists and organizations, but also individuals who are vocal about it. And somehow, let's say movements like 50-50 by 2020, Me Too, practical actions that other organizations offer, like mentorship schemes for female producers or tailor-made script writing for combating stereotypes on paper. These are the practicalities that need to be achieved, and they will not be achieved if the policymakers are not ready to understand that the data is there. And then, of course, not look for the ready-made cut for all territories. That would be too naive to think about, but really take important national decisions to achieve a better result. And if in voluntary manner you cannot do it, then you have to make it an obligation. This is what we think should happen.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we all know that art is not about money, but we still see that money is connected to art, for example, in funding films. And we all know, we heard that today also, that female films are funded with less money. So how can you connect these things, money and strategy or activism?
I connect it to the complexity of the subject and complexity of the systemic discrimination that happens. Because we also believe, I think we do know that there have been countries, and I sadly there are still some who believe that the gender topic and the representation of women is an issue of women only. You know, it's like a little Cinderella field that couple of women are concerned, and it's not a societal issue. And I think that's where the whole problem starts, and then you can relate it to the money issue as well. If you have an access to power, if you have right people, aware people deciding, men or women, deciding about the content they are financing, about the characters they are putting on screen, then this change is escalating in a more efficient pace, like Susan and Daphne were also indicating towards. And that means that you cannot anymore discuss gender equality as a little topic. And you can also not allow that other important values and issues are kind of overshadowing it a little bit. Man, in a subsidy-driven business or sector like we are all in, I think the politicians and the policymakers should absolutely feel a bit more responsible on allocating the funds. And this is how you go to the core of the problem. And that's how you eliminate or you try to eliminate the stereotype on the script level. This is how you count the crew. You incentivize the producers to employ not necessarily only men in traditionally men-driven positions, but you recruit female as well. But what is more important for me in all that is that you don't necessarily only do it for a specific woman or a specific profession representative. I think what is very important, you do it for a better societal development. And that is the core, because that is how you bring the informed and the progressive change. And it has to be about action and not about declaration only.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. What do you think about the idea of, for example, force a film festival to include 50% of, I don't know, female produced, directed films or something like that, you know, to just make the rule?
Right, absolutely. All the questions you're driving is kind of logically taking us on a trip of of the film value chain somehow, and we cannot only rely on the funder. And if we have some good examples, and luckily we do have good examples of countries where policymakers, where funders are more aware than in others, of course, then if you create the content, then this content has to have an equal circulation. And that is when the whole topic of alternative curation, progressive programming, looking out for content that is daring, that is unapologetic sometimes, you know, really bringing this to the audience and not expecting that a film has to have like a unified acceptance, but really starting a debate that is harsh. We know that these debates are harsh because those debates bring us back to the historically rooted stereotypes in many ways. And I think that if all festivals really sign up to the pledge, for instance, that we know has been existed, you know, if not COVID-19, 2020 should have been a rather important year for this agenda. We should have all sit together and really make a very critical self-check. I think right now we are a little bit in a situation when the bigger enemy, like the invisible enemy out there for the health, is overshadowing the issues. But that does not mean that there is no home domestic violence. That does not mean that females are not getting access to the budgets that are higher. It means that all our problems are still there. Let's give a credit to the action that we collectively did, that we have achieved a good awareness, but we are certainly very much still far away from the targets being met.
So can you tell us something about what helped, for example, Georgian women in this to get a foot into the door or to get around in the business? Is there any kind of special training or something?
Thank you very much for relating to my homeland. I work internationally for over 10 years now, but my heart is always, of course, in the country from where I'm coming and where I started to discover the cinema and then make it more international. I shall be very brief in my reply. In Georgia, there's been a huge movement of young talent, female filmmakers who, in my view, in my personal opinion, are absolutely rewriting the history of a contemporary woman and asking a very critical questions about the past as well. But the only drive they have is the will and the resistance and the real drive to go out there, you know, not necessarily always wait for the right moment, but just unapologetically go out and make the stories they want to be seen. We have a very current example of that, a film titled Beginning, made by Thea, which was labeled as a Cannes Film 2020, scooped 4 main awards in San Sebastian a week ago, and in a way even made a very peculiar case of a top European festival giving 4 main awards to one film. And the jury comment there was that the film has achieved to show us a new narrative in cinema and to show us with a female director, female leads, and a project that was in severe finding conditions for many years before it hit the screen. So I think there are, for the moment, there are some initiatives in Georgia, but not necessarily structured programs that help. But because of the geopolitical and the historic context of small country like Georgia, it's also a social behavior that local women, local artists are finding a strong moment to unite and come up with the cinematic language.
So that leads me to my next question, because that sounds like networking, of course, is very important in Georgia and in every country. But can you tell us some more things about networking and collaborations? Why is it so important on a local and on a European and international level?
We believe that networks give insight into important issues. And I think we all collectively, and when I say we, it's you, your organization, it's us, it's many other partners that we team up in time by time that bring the importance of this subject to funders, to festivals, maybe cross-sectoral as well. And what we also create is an avenue for a long-term relation. And at this point, I would like to thank Pro Quote Film that they are, for instance, always reaching out to IWA Network. And for us, it's a gesture of real practical cooperation. What lacks a little bit is to translate the existing data into policy, not everywhere, but it's still not on the level that we would all collectively like to do. And the collective action that we are taking as networks, as collaborators, brings us to an important element to once again make a vivid signal that equality is actually a fundamental element of human rights. It is a topic, if overseen, then we absolutely are fading away from democracy. And if we are fading away from democracy, then the value and the quality of life of our citizens, not in a country, but globally, I would say, is decreasing. And for that reason, equality agenda cannot be something that is overshadowed, but rather has to be proactively put into action. And that can be done through programs on European level, through national policies, and real and not only declarative cooperations between professional networks.
Thank you so much, Tamara. It was wonderful what you said. Thank you so much. Thank you for having you.
Pleasure is mine.
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you so much.
Okay.
But we should not forget to give the hint to the film screening we have at 6 p.m. The film God Exists. Her name is Petunia. And you find the link on our Facebook account, or maybe on our, I think also on our website if you want to join us. And the streaming is followed by a discussion with Tiona Struga-Mitewska, the female director of the film.
Okay, so that was the Q Talk live event, Pro Quote Film, Women's Best for Europe. It was wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny.
And thanks to all our guests. Goodbye.